So September 9th, 2018, and we're interviewing Sherry Hulien while Bart is lost somewhere in the mountains of Virginia or North Carolina or Tennessee.
He was in North Carolina at one point. I don't know where he is now.
But anyway, thanks for interviewing us. So could you just tell the camera about, your history of Myrtle Grove? I mean, when you came here, or if you grew up here, just sort of your time.
I did grow up here. The first church meeting was actually held in my great-grandparents' house. So my entire life was structured around Myrtle Grove Methodist. From how your weekly schedule was set up at home, I grew up with my grandparents for a while, and then I lived with my aunt and uncle. Both were in the church family. My other, aunt, my grandparents, brothers and sisters, they all came to church here. Every time we'd come to church, my grandmother would remind me that the one-room schoolhouse used to be where the cemetery was, and it's still funny because when I dream about the church, like if I have a dream and it's just based in the church, it's almost always built different in my mind, because like the nursery is down a different hallway with a little half door, and my great-grandmother taught my 4-year-old Sunday school class, and I can remember running on the chairs and getting in trouble. And we were talking earlier about my family. A lot of them have moved on to other churches, or and they're a big part of other churches, but I have not felt that pull to leave here. I feel the pull to stay because I have my children, and I want my children to have that same foundation I had. I want them to have that history where I can point and say, my mama stood right there, or my grandmother was here. I can remember meeting my husband. The first time I ever saw him, he was maybe 9, but the first time I ever saw him he was walking down the left side of the sanctuary. They were late for church, and I was sitting on the right side, and I remember asking my grandmother who they were, and I remember that I tell Bart that, even laughingly, that I still remember the moment I saw him.
Now, is Bart's sister Kate, is she older or younger?
They're twins.
Okay. See, that explains it because, believe it or not, I met Kate when I was a 6th grader at choir camp, and she's my brother's age. And my brother's 40, and so I was trying to do the math. So I didn't realize they were twins.
They're twins.
Okay.
That's actually what made me notice him, other than he's obviously a loving, wonderful husband. But it was the first time I'd ever seen twins that were a boy and a girl, and I remember watching them walk in, and his father had a huge, bright smile. And, of course, they were late, and my grandmother made us get to church 45 minutes early so that no one could sit on the left corner of the 5th pew. And so I remember watching them walk in, and he was smiling and shaking hands, and I remember seeing the kids and thinking, I don't know them. Why don't I know them? And she was like, they're twins. And I'm like, twins? I did not know you could have twins. I was clearly not that smart, but...
Cool. Well, what's some of so you grew up in the church from your time either as a kid or youth or even into, beginning of being an adult. Are there some favorite memories that you have or that you could share?
I started, we used to have MYF, which was the Methodist Youth. My parents, Mickey and Eddie, they actually were the leaders of the younger group. So you could start in 4th, 5th grade. They used to take us to Shakey's Pizza all the time, and this is before anybody cared about seatbelts, so my dad had a truck with a cover on it, and he'd piled 20 youth in the back of that truck and hit every pothole. We're bumping all over the place, and we'd go out before when the field and before the expansion of the Sunday school classes. We used to play, out in the field on Sunday afternoons. We pretty much spent all of Sunday here. You didn't just come on Wednesdays, you also came for church on Sunday morning, Sunday school. You stayed later. Usually you came back for lunch. You'd meet at 3 o'clock for choir. From choir, you'd go into youth ministry. From that, you'd go into evening church. And they used to line us all up and make us sit on the front row. And the pastor, different pastors, they would call you out by name. And they wouldn't say what you were doing. Just if you weren't paying attention or doing something, you'd just be, he's talking, Sherry, talking. And you would know you were not paying attention. And it's just sort of I actually missed when night services, and that's nobody's fault. It's just people are busier now, and I stopped coming to night services, but I did miss them when they stopped, because that was something, you'd sort of watch the sunset on the weekend, and you knew school was starting the next morning, and it was just a kind of a good way as a kid that we would start our week. I went to choir camp. The first time I went to choir camp was the first camp I went away on my own. I was staying away from my parents, and Randy White was the choir director at the time. And I remember I wanted to quit choir. I cannot sing, and anybody that knows me knows I cannot sing. It is very bad. And so I would come because I was part of the fellowship. It was my friends. It was my life. And I sang bad. And so I would be embarrassed, and I wouldn't want to sing anymore. So I stopped coming to choir, and he came to my house. And this is how you know you're a bad singer. He said that he needed me to come back, and I said, well, I can't sing. Like, I know I'm bad, and they're all so good. And he said, well, he says that and it meant something to me as a kid, and he could have just been, but it meant something to me, where he said that my presence mattered to other people, and that it was important for me to be a part of the group, even if I couldn't sing, and I was allowed to lip sync. So, if a church choir director tells you you can lip sync, you're bad. But Randy passed away. We were at choir camp. We went to choir camp, and it was one of the best experiences I'd ever had, and it was the first time away from home, and there was 4 of us, I believe, at choir camp that year, and they sent for us early. We came home for Randy, and
that was the one, and probably the same one I went to.
Probably. You were probably there.
Well, yeah, I started going, let's see, first year I went was 94?
It was way before. Yeah, it was in the 80s.
But probably the deans were the same. Larry Lord, John Webb, John Floyd Webb.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Well, I went to choir camps, and then I started doing, going to Blue Lake Youth Camp, and over the years, my parents stopped doing youth, and then there were other leaders. Larry Anderson was associate pastor, and he took us on a lot of trips. He used to let me ride on the wooden stool in the van where there was never enough space. I was little, and I got to control the radio. We went to the Appalachians. We went to the first Appalachian Sensation. We worked with Redbird, and I still sometimes talk to them. Vivian Mousen now. She's married to a pastor here in town. She was our youth director at the time, and she probably, I would say, changed my life. I was going through a hard time. I was moving in from my grandparents in with my parents, who are my parents now, were not at the time, and it was kind of a hard time to be a teenager. And she really grounded me. I could have gone, one way or the other, but she really pulled me here. And when there were times where I didn't feel like I had anywhere else to go. I had a loving family, but as a kid, you don't see that sometimes. And all I saw was my own pain. And she would call me and just say, hey, I'm at work, just come hang out with me. And I would get dropped off at the church, and I would be here all day long during the summer, just trying to find something to do. And I spent most of my life here in I'd probably say in my early 20s. I thought I was smarter, thought I didn't need to be told, did not follow God. I followed what I thought was best for me, and it turns out I was wrong. And so I stayed away. I'd come back for holidays or with family, but I never really was a part of it again until I turned 30, and I came back with my sister, Rebecca, and we started coming to services. My dad played in the band, and there was Bart again. And so he started sitting with me in church, and just sort of running into each other with different things. And then his father had passed away, and he was having a hard time. I had some personal stuff happen in my life, and I was having a very hard time. And my mom was worried about me being alone on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day because that had a significant date to it. And my dad invited Bart, because it was his first New Year's without his father. So he invited him to Key West, and I went to Key West, and both of us got delayed, neither of us really knowing the other one except for somebody we met at church. And we ran into each other on the streets, and it really was from that moment on, I can say that I know for a fact that God led me back here, and he led me back to Bart, and he led me to keep my children here, and this is where we're supposed to be.
Well, very cool. Very cool. And you've covered pretty much in terms of stories and everything. Something, what's some, Patty likes to ask the question. To me, I like the story part a little bit more, but it actually is important to know what's the ways, I mean, you've served here a lot in the children's thing. If you didn't mind just for a moment just saying
Sure.
how you've served since you've been back.
I had Reese in 2005, and I came to church services. You know, I was not a part of a Sunday school class. I was not a part of any young group class. I just pretty much came for the service and went home. Dawn called. She was doing Vacation Bible School, and they needed teachers. Well, I did not think that was for me. I wouldn't know how to be a teacher. I wouldn't know what to say. I can't even pray in a group. I mean, I just didn't think I had that capability. And my sister said, well, I'll do it with you, my sister Rachel. And we came, and then I said, I'll do anything but fifth grade. Fifth grade's the worst in my mind back then for Vacation Bible School, because they're too old. In their minds, they're too old when really they need it, and they're just ready to be moving on to middle school, and it's just silliness to them. And I thought, ooh, I don't want, and they smell bad too, but I said, I don't want fifth grade. And she goes, well, you can do anything but fifth grade. And she called me about 9 o'clock on Sunday and said, bad news, no one took fifth grade, so I do need you. And so my sister and I came, and it was great. And actually, that's when I realized that not only did fifth grade stink, but they really needed it. And some of the kids that I met that first year doing Vacation Bible School, they were grown adults now with kids of their own even, funny enough. But they stuck with me. And so I actually, that was in 2005, so I did fifth grade every year for the next probably 5 or 6 years. And then our Young and Restless class decided to take over Vacation Bible School for a year, and they were gonna, because it used to be every year or so you'd pick a new director, and we said we'd do it as a class. And so we did it as a class the first year, so I stopped teaching fifth grade. I said I stopped teaching fifth grade when my last kindergartner moved to fifth grade. And then I started doing the directing, and then Amy joined in, and now Amy does it, and I just assist.
Okay, cool. Well,